This video is about something called Miller's Law and how it relates to coding. You may know Miller's Law by its other name, the 7 plus or minus 2 rule. This rule states that human minds can think best with a certain number of items in short-term memory. That number is close to 7 in most people, hence the name of the rule. This comes from Dr. George Miller. He was a professor at Harvard in the last century, and his paper on the 7 plus or minus 2 rule is one of the most highly cited papers in the history of psychology. And can we just take a moment to appreciate this first sentence? My problem is that I have been persecuted by an integer. What a way to start a publication. Here's a quote from the paper. The span of immediate memory imposes severe limitations on the amount of information that we are able to receive, process, and remember. So we're talking about a fundamental aspect of how the human mind works. Here's another quote from the same paper. By organizing the stimulus inputs simultaneously into several dimensions and successively into a sequence of chunks, we manage to break or at least stretch this informational bottleneck. So how do we do that? How do we break those information bottlenecks in our minds? The secret is in that last quote, when Dr. Miller talks about a sequence of chunks. That word chunk is a formal term in psychology. What does it mean? Wikipedia tells us, in cognitive psychology, chunking is a process by which small individual pieces of a set of information are bound together to create a meaningful whole later on in memory. In other words, this is how your mind groups several pieces of information into one thing. That's a chunk. Now, when we write Python code, what is the chunk of our reasoning? The chunk could be a variable, it could be a container like a list or a dict, it could be a function. But the most powerful kind of chunk in Python code is a class. This is especially powerful because we can craft our own classes, because classes define the structure and behavior of the objects created from them. When you create a class, you have invented a new type of chunk, and that chunk can make your reasoning more clear, efficient, and insightful. In other words, good class design can boost your IQ, at least when you're thinking about your code. It may not help with everything in your life, but we'll take this. Some classes are very powerful at this. For example, DataFrame. The DataFrame class is the primary power tool in the Pandas library. It has become the default choice for tabular data manipulation in Python, making data analysis workflows rapid and intuitive. And of course, DataFrame is a Python class. Once upon a time, DataFrame did not exist. Someone made it up, and it changed the world. Because now you can think in terms of data frames. Now you can think in this powerful and expressive chunk. On a smaller scale, you can do this too, in your own code. It starts with objectifying your code, making it more object-oriented. Let's walk through an example. Python's datetime module has a date class, and imagine you are working with a date range, a start date and an end date. What are some of the things you need to do with this pair of dates? For one thing, you will want code that validates your data at runtime. This is about error checking, making sure that the start date is not actually after the end date. Another thing you may need to do is to check whether a certain date is in that interval, if it is between the start and the end date. You may also need to iterate through all the dates between start and end, for example, in a for loop. And finally, you may need to quickly construct common start-end pairs that you repeatedly need in your code. You can make a function for each of these. So you have 2 variables plus 4 functions. That is 6 chunks to keep track of in your mind, and that is flirting with the limit of Miller's Law. Or you can make a class. Here's one. It's called dateInterval. And this code encapsulates everything we talked about in a single class. I won't step through it here. You can screenshot it and look through it later if you like, but it captures everything in one class, all the functionality we talked about. More importantly, now you can think in terms of a date interval, just like you can think in terms of a data frame. You have created a new type of chunk. This is more cognitively efficient and leaves more bandwidth in your brain according to Miller's Law. How can you use these principles in your own code? Reply in the comments.